Do you know how much these shoes cost?" Mr. Wallace scoffed, his voice dripping with disdain. "This is why people like you shouldn't be working in places like this. You're clumsy, you're careless, and people like you cannot afford things like this." Keisha, the black waitress's posture remained composed. What Mr. Wallace didn't realize as he insulted and humiliated the poised black waitress standing before him was that the very woman he had just insulted was the owner of the restaurant, and she held the power to save his crumbling business. But he was about to find out the hard way. As we delve fully into the story, comment where you're watching from, and click on the subscribe button if you believe in justice and stand against prejudice. The soft notes of jazz filled the air in the Monarch's Table, an upscale restaurant that had become the talk of the town. Known for its elegant ambiance, impeccable service, and menu curated by world-class chefs, the Monarch's Table was more than just a dining establishment. It was an experience. Every detail, from the crystal chandeliers to the imported linens, spoke of luxury. It was the kind of place where people saved for special occasions or boasted about dining there to their friends. The restaurant was alive with energy. Tables filled with lively conversations, glasses clinking, and the mouth-watering aroma of gourmet dishes wafted through the air. But beneath the polished surface, the Monarch's Table had been facing a quiet but growing issue. Complaints from staff about rude and racist comments of some customers had begun to surface. Though the restaurant's reputation remained strong, these complaints had reached the ears of Keisha James, the restaurant's owner. Keisha was known for her hands-on leadership style and unwavering commitment to excellence. Instead of relying solely on reports from her managers, she had decided to take matters into her own hands. Donning the uniform of a waitress, she entered her own restaurant to observe firsthand what was truly going on. It was the busiest hour of the evening, and the staffs moved with precision, catering to every customer's needs. Among them was Keisha, dressed in the simple uniform of a waitress, balancing a tray with the grace and poise of someone who had done this 1,000 times. Her smile was warm, her demeanor calm, and her focus unwavering. But what no one in the restaurant knew, except for a few trusted staff members and few customers like Mr. and Mrs. Turner, was that Keisha wasn't just another waitress. She was the owner of the restaurant. Tonight, however, she wasn't playing the role of the boss. She had chosen to work undercover as a waitress to discover for herself the incidents of disrespectful and, at times, racist behavior from certain customers. Keisha wanted to experience what her team faced daily and to understand how she could protect them. As Keisha moved through the restaurant, blending in seamlessly with the staff, she carried herself with grace and poise. No one suspected she was the woman who owned the establishment they admired so much. Her uniform was as crisp as any other server's, and her demeanor was approachable yet professional. Keisha's goal was clear. She wanted to understand the dynamics between the staff and customers without the barrier of titles or hierarchy. She wanted to see for herself if the whispers of dissatisfaction had merit, and if so, how she could address them. As the lunch hour began, the restaurant filled with its usual mix of affluent diners, regular customers, and curious first-timers who had finally managed to secure a reservation. Keisha watched closely, observing her staff interact with customers. Most of them were attentive and professional. And then the door swung open, and Mr. Wallace entered. His presence immediately drew attention, not because of his charm, but because of his commanding, almost arrogant demeanor. His tailored suit and expensive watch reflected his wealth, and he carried himself with an air of entitlement that was hard to miss. Behind him trailed his assistant, a young man carrying a sleek leather briefcase and looking as though he wanted to melt into the floor. Mr. Wallace glanced around the restaurant, his nose wrinkling slightly, as if the very air didn't meet his standards. The hostess, ever cheerful, greeted him with a warm smile, blending into her role effortlessly. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to the Monarch's table," she said. Mr. Wallace barely looked at her. Brushing past her, he muttered, "Just get me a table," Mr. Wallace interrupted, waving a dismissive hand. "And make it quick. I don't have all night." The hostess, visibly flustered, but professional, quickly led him to a table in the center of the dining area. Mr. Wallace sank into his chair, looking around with thinly veiled disdain. "This is it," he muttered under his breath, loud enough for his assistant to hear. "This is the place everyone's been raving about? Hardly impressive." Keisha's smile didn't falter as she watched him sit at the empty table in the center of the room. From her spot near the counter, Naya, one of the younger waitresses, noticed the exchange and frowned. "That guy's going to be trouble," she whispered to another server. Keisha, observing the scene from a distance, adjusted her tray and walked over to his table, her expression as welcoming as ever. "Good evening, sir," she said, her voice warm and inviting. "Welcome to our restaurant." As Keisha approached Mr. Wallace's table with a menu, his irritation was evident. He sighed loudly, looking around the room as though inspecting it for flaws. "Do you always take this long to serve your customers?" he asked, his tone dripping with annoyance. "Apologies for the wait, sir," Keisha replied, her voice steady. "Would you like any recommendations from our menu today? Or can I start you off with a drink, or perhaps show you our wine list?" Mr. Wallace waved her off dismissively. "Just get me a steak, medium rare, and make it quick." From a nearby table, the Turners, regular patrons of the restaurant, watched the scene unfold. Evelyn leaned toward her husband. "I feel for Keisha," she whispered. "That one looks like he's going to be a handful." Mark chuckled softly. "She'll handle it. She always does." Keisha returned to the counter, her expression calm and composed despite Mr. Wallace's behavior. She glanced at Nia, who had been watching nervously. "It's nothing I can't handle," Keisha said quietly, offering her a reassuring smile. "Let's focus on making this a great day for everyone else." As Keisha returned to Mr. Wallace with his steak, Mr. Wallace didn't even bother to look up. Instead, he tapped his fingers on the table impatiently. "Do you even have premium wine here?" he asked, his tone dripping with condescension. Keisha's smile didn't falter. "Yes, sir. We have a wonderful selection. I'll bring the menu right over." As she turned to walk away, she heard him mutter under his breath, just loud enough for her to hear. "They should have hired someone who knows their place. High-end restaurants like this shouldn't have people like her serving me," he said. Keisha's steps faltered for just a fraction of a second before she continued walking. She placed the tray down at the bar and took a deep breath, silently reminding herself why she was there. She had chosen this role tonight to see the reality her staff faced, and it was becoming painfully clear. Returning with the wine list, she placed it gently on the table. "Here's our wine menu, sir. Please take your time to look it over. Let me know if you'd like any recommendations." Mr. Wallace barely acknowledged her as he flipped through the menu, his lips curling slightly. "This selection is tolerable," he finally said. "Bring me a bottle of your best red and make sure it's actually good. I've been disappointed enough tonight." Keisha nodded. "Of course, sir. I'll have it out shortly." As the evening progressed, Mr. Wallace's complaints grew louder and more frequent. He criticized everything from the lighting to the arrangement of the silverware, drawing the attention of nearby diners. At one point, he snapped his fingers at Keisha, motioning for her to come over. "This steak," he said, prodding it with his fork, "is overcooked. Do you people even know how to run a kitchen?" Keisha remained calm. "I'm sorry to hear that, sir. Would you like me to have it replaced?" "No," he said with a dramatic sigh. "It's fine. I've already lost my appetite for that." Bring me the menu again. I will place another order. The atmosphere in the monarch's table remained elegant, but the tension at Mr. Wallace's table began to ripple through the room. He sat impatiently, tapping his fingers against the polished wooden surface as he glanced around. The quiet hum of diners enjoying their meals seemed to irritate him further. Keisha, moving with her usual grace, approached his table with a calm smile. "Mr. Wallace, your order is being prepared. The chef is ensuring everything is perfect for you," she said. But her professionalism was met with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Perfect? I didn't ask for perfection. I asked for a fast service," he snapped. "If you can't handle simple orders, maybe this job isn't for you." Keisha's smile didn't falter, though the sharpness of his words could have cut through the strongest of resolves. "Thank you for your patience, sir. I'll check on your order right away," she replied evenly before stepping away. What would you do if someone spoke to you like that without respect, just because of your skin color? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more stories like this. From a nearby table, Mia, the younger waitress, watched the interaction with a mix of frustration and admiration. She turned to another server and whispered, "How does she stay so calm? If that were me." She trailed off, shaking her head. As Keisha walked past the Turner's table, they called her over. "Keisha, you're handling everything so wonderfully, as always," Evelyn said warmly. Mark nodded, adding with a smile, "You're too good for this place. They're lucky to have you." Keisha chuckled softly, the kind of laugh that masked years of experience. "Thank you, Mr. Turner. It's always a pleasure to serve you both." Mr. Wallace, overhearing the compliment, rolled his eyes and muttered under his breath, "Some people don't know their place." His tone carried a thinly veiled arrogance that made Nia glance nervously toward Keisha. Keisha paused briefly, her back to Mr. Wallace, but chose not to react. She simply resumed her work, her professionalism unshaken. She knew better than to let his words provoke her. There were bigger things at stake. As the minutes passed, Mr. Wallace's impatience grew. He leaned back in his chair, sighing loudly and snapping his fingers to get Keisha's attention. When she approached, her expression calm, he said, "Are you going to take all day? Or are you planning to bring me my meal sometime this century?" Keisha nodded politely. "Your meal is on its way, Mr. Wallace. I appreciate your understanding." He scoffed, shaking his head. "Understanding? I don't need your gratitude. I need you to do your job." The restaurant's atmosphere remained polished, but the undercurrent of tension was undeniable. Mr. Wallace's attitude contrasted sharply with the elegance of the setting and the warmth of the other diners. Yet, through it all, Keisha continued to maintain her poise, knowing the moment of truth was drawing near. Mr. Wallace, now visibly irritated, waved his hand in the air, signaling for Keisha. His loud, exaggerated gestures drew the attention of nearby diners, who exchanged uneasy glances. Keisha approached his table with her usual calm demeanor, the soft clink of plates and hushed chatter of other diners providing a stark contrast to Mr. Wallace's growing impatience. "What seems to be the problem, sir?" Keisha asked, her voice steady and professional. Mr. Wallace scoffed, slamming his fork down on the table. "The problem," he repeated, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "The problem is that this is supposed to be a fine dining experience, and instead I'm dealing with delays, mistakes, and—" He paused, glancing her up and down disdainfully. "Mediocre service at best. Is this what you call fine dining?" Keisha stood her ground, her expression composed. "I apologize if your experience hasn't met your expectations, Mr. Wallace. We strive to provide the best service to all our customers. I'd be happy to address any specific concerns you have." Her calm response only seemed to infuriate him further. He leaned back in his chair, waving a dismissive hand. "Specific concerns?" he repeated mockingly. "How about everything? The service, the food, the atmosphere, it's all subpar. Honestly, people like you should stick to what you're good at, and it's certainly not working in a place like this." The room fell silent, the diners watching the exchange with bated breath. Even Naya, standing near the counter, froze, her tray of drinks trembling in her hands. Evelyn Turner leaned toward her husband, whispering, "This is unbearable. Why isn't anyone stepping in?" Keisha, unfazed by Mr. Wallace's remarks, replied evenly, "We take pride in serving all our customers. Some, however, are harder to please." Her words were measured, her tone calm, but there was a subtle edge to her voice that didn't go unnoticed. Mr. Wallace narrowed his eyes, his arrogance bristling at her quiet strength. "Oh, so now you've got an attitude?" he shot back, leaning forward. "Let me tell you something, Miss Waitress. You act like you run this place, but let me make one thing clear. You're nothing more than a server. You're here to cater to people like me, and nothing more." Keisha's lips curved into a faint, unreadable smile. She glanced briefly toward the office door, her eyes lingering for just a moment before returning to Mr. Wallace. "Thank you for your feedback, sir," she said, her tone as composed as ever. "I'll make sure your concerns are addressed appropriately." Her response seemed to catch Mr. Wallace off guard. He frowned, his irritation deepening as he tried to decipher her expression. "You'd better," he muttered, leaning back in his chair with a scowl. As Keisha walked away, Naya hurried to her side. "Keisha," she whispered urgently, "why are you letting him talk to you like that? He's out of control." Keisha placed a reassuring hand on Nia's arm. "Patience," she said softly. "Sometimes the best response is no response at all, until the time is right." Nia bit her lip, glancing nervously back at Mr. Wallace. "I don't know how you're staying so calm," she admitted. "You'll see," Keisha replied, her voice steady. "It's not about reacting, it's about knowing when to act." Meanwhile, Evelyn Turner couldn't contain her frustration any longer. "Mark," she whispered fiercely, "we need to say something. This has gone far enough." Mark shook his head, his expression conflicted. "Let's wait and see what happens," he said. "Keisha knows what she's doing." Back at his table, Mr. Wallace continued to fume, muttering under his breath as he stabbed at his steak. "Act like she's in charge," he sneered. "She's just a waitress, nothing more." One would think all that was enough, but unfortunately, Mr. Wallace was not done humiliating Keisha. Seeing how the other staff hovered around her and how she carried herself like a boss, he was disgusted to the core and hell-bent on frustrating her. Seated with his usual air of entitlement, Mr. Wallace tapped his fingers impatiently on the table. Keisha approached with his new order, carrying it carefully on a silver tray, her poise unshaken by his earlier rudeness. As she leaned forward to set the plate in front of him, her foot accidentally brushed against his, causing a mild dust on his shoes. His polished designer shoe was sticking out from under the table, unnoticed by her in the moment. The contact was brief, but Mr. Wallace reacted as though it were a personal affront. "What in the world?" he bellowed, his voice cutting through the quiet murmur of the dining room. His chair screeched as he pushed back from the table, glaring at Keisha. "Are you blind? Or are you just incompetent?" Keisha straightened immediately, her hands gripping the tray tightly to steady herself. "I'm so sorry, sir," she said calmly. "It was an accident." "An accident?" Mr. Wallace scoffed, his voice dripping with disdain. "This is why people like you shouldn't be working in places like this. You're clumsy, you're careless, and you're clearly not fit for this job." Keisha's posture remained composed, though her heart pounded in her chest. She refused to let his words rattle her. "Again, I apologize, sir. I didn't see your foot there," she said softly, attempting to de-escalate the situation. But Mr. Wallace wasn't interested in resolution. He leaned forward, his face inches from hers, his tone venomous. "Do you know how much these shoes cost?" he demanded. "More than your entire month's paycheck, that's for sure. People like you could never afford something like this." The diners nearby turned their heads toward the commotion, their expressions a mix of shock and discomfort. Keisha stood still despite the lingering sting of humiliation. The soft jazz music played faintly in the background, but the atmosphere was tense. All eyes were on her as she stood at Mr. Wallace's table. He sat with an air of smug satisfaction, cutting into his meal as though nothing had happened. Mr. Wallace leaned back in his chair and smirked. "You know," he began, his tone condescending, "I've been thinking about it. I don't think a simple apology can fix the damage you caused." Keisha tilted her head slightly, her brow furrowing. "I've already apologized, sir. I'd like to move forward and ensure your dining experience is satisfactory." "Oh, I'm not done with you yet," Mr. Wallace said, his voice loud enough to draw attention from nearby tables. He tapped his foot on the floor, the polished leather shoe glinting under the soft lights. "That scuff mark you made on my luxury shoes? You should clean it properly." Keisha's expression hardened. "I'm happy to send someone over to clean your shoes, sir," she replied evenly. "But I won't be doing that myself." Mr. Wallace's smirk widened as he leaned forward. "Not with your hands," he said coldly. "With your uniform. Wipe it clean. Show some respect for the people who actually work hard to spend money here so you can be paid to live your miserable life. If you were in Keisha's shoes, what would you do? Would you refuse to clean off his shoes and get him out of your restaurant, or wait for the right moment to declare who you really are? Let us know in the comments." Nia, who had been hovering near the counter, gasped audibly. "He can't be serious," she whispered to another server, her voice trembling with disbelief. Evelyn Turner clutched her husband's hand tightly, her face pale with outrage. "This has gone too far," she muttered. But like the others, she remained frozen in her seat. Keisha's fists clenched at her sides, her professionalism warring with her pride. "Sir," she began, her voice measured, "I'm happy to accommodate your needs as a guest, but I won't demean myself for anyone." Mr. Wallace's smirk disappeared, replaced by a scowl. He pointed a finger at her, his voice rising. "You're already beneath me. You don't have a choice. Either you do it, or I'll make sure everyone in this town knows how unprofessional this place really is. Trust me, people like me have the power to ruin places like this. I will be informing your manager, too, of how rude and incompetent your service to me was today. Do you want to lose your job?" Keisha took a deep breath, glancing around the room. The other diners were silent, their eyes filled with a mix of pity and discomfort. Nia stepped forward, her voice trembling with emotion. "Keisha, don't do it," she pleaded. "You don't have to stoop to his level." Even Evelyn spoke up, her voice firm. "He's trying to humiliate you. Don't give him the satisfaction." But Keisha shook her head gently. "This isn't about him," she said quietly. "It's about maintaining peace." She turned back to Mr. Wallace, her expression calm but resolute. "I don't agree with what you're asking, but I'll do this, only to ensure the situation doesn't escalate further." With deliberate movements, Keisha knelt down and carefully lifted the hem of her uniform, using the edge of the fabric to wipe the imaginary dust from Mr. Wallace's shoe. The room was deathly silent, the act unfolding like a scene from a nightmare. Nia's hands shook as she covered her mouth, tears threatening to spill from her eyes. Evelyn looked away, unable to watch, while Mark muttered angrily under his breath. "This is disgusting," he said, gripping his fork tightly. As Keisha stood, her face unreadable, Mr. Wallace chuckled cruelly. "Good," he said smugly. "Maybe next time you'll learn your place." Just as Keisha turned to leave, Mr. Wallace reached for his water bottle. He unscrewed the cap slowly, his actions deliberate, as though savoring the moment. Before Keisha could react, he flung the water in her face, the liquid splashing across her uniform and hair. The diners gasped audibly, and Nia took a step forward, fury written across her face. "That's enough," she shouted, but Keisha raised a hand, stopping her. "This," Mr. Wallace said mockingly, his voice dripping with contempt, is to remind you where you belong. You're not my kind. You're nothing. Just be grateful for the chance to serve me. If you believe Mr. Wallace was wrong and everyone should be treated with respect, no matter who they are or what their color is, click the subscribe button as we continue the story. The silence in the room was deafening as Keisha stood there, her soaked uniform clinging to her. Slowly, she wiped her face with a corner of her apron. Her composure unbroken despite the blatant humiliation. Without a word, she turned and walked back toward the kitchen, the eyes of every diner following her. In the kitchen, Naya stormed in after her. Keisha, this isn't right. You shouldn't have done that. He had no right to treat you like that. Keisha turned to Naya, her voice calm but filled with quiet strength. Sometimes it's not about them, Naya, she said. Sometimes it's about waiting for the right moment. From across the room, Keisha watched him quietly, her calm exterior betraying nothing of the storm brewing beneath. She glanced at Nia, giving her a small nod, and then turned her attention back to the dining room, where the tension hung thick in the air. The moment of truth was drawing closer, and while Mr. Wallace remained oblivious, everyone else in the room could sense that something big was about to happen. This was the right moment to reveal the truth. The tension in the monarch's table had finally begun to settle after the heated interactions earlier. Mr. Wallace, smug and oblivious to the storm he had created, leaned back in his chair, savoring the last bites of his meal. He dabbed at the corners of his mouth with a linen napkin, his every move exuding entitlement. As a server passed by, he snapped his fingers to get their attention. "Bring me the owner of this place," he ordered, his tone imperious. "I have an important business proposal to discuss." The server hesitated, glancing nervously toward the kitchen. "Of course, sir. I'll let the owner know you're requesting a meeting." Satisfied, Mr. Wallace shifted in his seat and began addressing the nearby diners, unprompted. "You know, I run a chain of luxury hotels," he said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "I've been looking to partner with an establishment like this to elevate my guests' dining experience. It could be a very lucrative deal for whoever owns this place." Evelyn Turner exchanged a knowing glance with her husband, her lips curling into a faint smile. "He has no idea," she murmured. In the kitchen, the server nervously approached Keisha. Miss James, Mr. Wallace is asking to meet with the owner. He says it's about a business proposal." Keisha paused for a moment, then exchanged a glance with Nia, who was standing nearby. "Are you really going to meet him after everything he's done?" Nia whispered, her voice tinged with anger and disbelief. Keisha nodded, a calm resolve in her eyes. "It's time." Removing her apron, Keisha changed her outfit to a sleek suit that looked ravishly expensive. She took a deep breath. She wasn't just about to confront Mr. Wallace. She was about to remind him, and everyone else in the room, who she truly was. As Keisha entered the dining room, the quiet hum of conversation ceased. All eyes followed her as she approached Mr. Wallace's table, her every step measured and purposeful. "Mr. Wallace," she began, her voice steady and commanding, "I hear you're requesting to meet with the owner." Mr. Wallace looked up from his portfolio, visibly annoyed. "What are you doing here?" he snapped. "Go get the owner. I don't have time to waste." Keisha smiled faintly, her calm demeanor unwavering. "You're speaking to her." The room fell into a stunned silence. Mr. Wallace blinked, confusion flashing across his face. "What did you just say?" he asked, his tone uncertain for the first time all afternoon. Keisha placed a sleek folder on the table in front of him, her movements deliberate. "I'm Keisha James," she stated firmly, "owner and CEO of the Monarch's Table, and the same person you humiliated and berated all evening." Mr. Wallace froze, his face draining of color as he opened the folder. Inside were ownership documents, financial statements, and media coverage of the restaurant's success, all bearing Keisha's name and signature. "You're the owner?" he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Keisha replied, her tone calm but firm. "And while you came here looking for a partnership, your behavior today has made one thing clear. You're not someone I'd ever want to do business with." Nearby diners began murmuring, their voices growing louder as the weight of the revelation sank in. A few began clapping softly, their applause spreading throughout the room. At a corner table, Evelyn Turner grinned proudly. "I knew she'd handle it perfectly," she said, nudging her husband. Nia, watching from the counter, broke into a wide smile, her earlier frustration replaced with admiration. The air in the monarch's table was thick with anticipation as Mr. Wallace sat frozen in his seat, the weight of his actions finally sinking in. His once confident demeanor had been replaced by an uneasy mix of embarrassment and desperation. Clearing his throat, he attempted to salvage the situation. "Miss James," he began, his voice shaky, I had no idea you were the owner. My behavior was out of line." He forced a weak smile, his eyes darting around the room at the disapproving stares of the other diners. "But surely we can put this behind us. I truly believe we could make a great partnership. Let me explain." Keisha raised her hand, her expression calm yet resolute. "There's nothing to explain, Mr. Wallace," she said, her voice steady and authoritative. "Your actions have spoken louder than any proposal ever could." Mr. Wallace opened his mouth to protest, but Keisha didn't give him the chance. "This restaurant was built on respect, dignity, and professionalism," she continued. "If you can't treat people with the same values we uphold here, then you have no place doing business with us. This meeting is over." The firmness in her tone left no room for argument. Mr. Sinat Wallace's shoulders sagged as the realization of his failure settled in. Was justice served, or should Mr. Wallace be forgiven and the proposal approved? Let us know in the comments what you think. The dining room, which had been silent throughout the confrontation, suddenly erupted into applause. The Turners led the charge, Evelyn clapping enthusiastically, while Mark nodded approvingly. Other diners joined in, their support echoing through the room. Near the counter, Nia wiped away a tear, her admiration for Keisha shining in her eyes. "She's incredible," she whispered to a fellow server, who nodded in agreement. Later that evening, as the restaurant wound down, Keisha sat in her private office, reflecting on the day's events. Her phone buzzed with notifications. Clips of the confrontation had gone viral, sparking widespread discussions about respect and professionalism. In a heartfelt interview with a local news outlet, Keisha shared her thoughts. "Respect isn't about titles or wealth," she said. "It's about how we treat each other, no matter our position in life. True strength lies in lifting others up, not tearing them down." Her words resonated with thousands, sparking online debates about humility, kindness, and the importance of equality in professional and personal interactions. As the days passed, Mr. Wallace's behavior became public knowledge. His arrogant treatment of Keisha and others was widely condemned, leading to a damaged reputation and setbacks in his business ventures. The failure to secure the partnership with the monarch's table cost him not only financially, but also socially, forcing him to reflect on his actions. Meanwhile, Keisha sat in her office overlooking the bustling restaurant below. The energy of her team and the satisfaction of the diners filled her with pride. She smiled, knowing that moments like these validated the challenges she had faced to build her restaurant on a foundation of respect and inclusion. As she closed her office door and stepped onto the restaurant floor, Keisha greeted her staff with words of encouragement and gratitude. "You're all what makes this place special," she said warmly. "Thank you for your hard work and for believing in the values we stand for." The restaurant hummed with renewed energy, each interaction a reflection of Keisha's leadership and principles. And as she walked past the diners, her quiet confidence reminded everyone present that true success is measured not by wealth, but by the way we treat others. Few days later, the monarch's table buzzed with its usual energy. The staff moved confidently across the floor, their interactions with diners reflecting a renewed sense of pride and purpose. Keisha, now back in her role as the owner, stood near the counter, watching her team thrive. Despite the challenges of the past few weeks, her resolve had only grown stronger. After the incident with Mr. Wallace, Keisha had taken decisive action. In a meeting with her staff, she addressed the importance of maintaining the restaurant's values of dignity and respect. "This isn't just a restaurant," she said, her voice firm but kind. "It's a space where everyone, staff and customers alike, should feel valued, and we won't tolerate anything less." Her words empowered her team, many of whom had witnessed the confrontation. Nia, in particular, felt a surge of confidence after Keisha's actions. "You showed us how to stand tall," she told Keisha one evening. "It means a lot." To ensure the restaurant continued to uphold its values, Keisha implemented new training sessions for her staff, focused on addressing and preventing discrimination. She also introduced a clear policy on customer behavior, making it known that respect was non-negotiable. Weeks later, on a quieter afternoon, the doors to the monarch's table swung open, and in walked Mr. Wallace. He was a stark contrast to the arrogant man who had caused such a scene weeks prior. His shoulders were slightly hunched, his demeanor subdued. He approached the counter where Keisha stood, her calm gaze meeting his. "Miss James," he began, his voice uncharacteristically soft. I came here to apologize." Keisha raised an eyebrow but said nothing, allowing him to continue. "What I said and did that day, it was wrong," he admitted, his tone sincere. "Your words made me reflect on how I've treated people. Not just you, but others throughout my life. I've been wrong for a long time and I'm sorry." The restaurant grew quiet as the staff and nearby diners subtly listened, curious about how Keisha would respond. "I appreciate your apology, Mr. Wallace," Keisha said after a moment, her voice steady. "Acknowledging your actions is a step in the right direction." Wallace nodded, his face showing genuine regret. "I know I can't undo what I've done, but I wanted you to know that I'm committed to doing better." Keisha's expression softened slightly, but her resolve remained firm. "While I accept your apology, Mr. Wallace, I must stand by my decision. I don't believe a business collaboration between us would align with the values we uphold here." Wallace nodded again, his shoulders slumping slightly, but he seemed to understand. "Thank you for hearing me out," he said quietly before leaving the restaurant. With the incident behind her, the monarch's table continued to thrive. Word of Keisha's leadership and the restaurant's inclusive values spread, drawing in new customers and strengthening the loyalty of regulars. The restaurant became a symbol of dignity, resilience, and the power of standing up for what's right. Nia, now a more confident and assertive team member, often reflected on how Keisha's actions had inspired her. "You don't just run a restaurant," she told Keisha one evening. "You're teaching us all how to be better people." In the final moments, Keisha stood near the large window of her restaurant, watching her staff work with precision and pride. The dining room was full of laughter, clinking glasses, and the hum of satisfied diners. She smiled as she noticed Nia confidently handling a table of demanding customers with grace, her composure a reflection of the lessons she had learned. Keisha took a deep breath, feeling a sense of fulfillment. The journey hadn't been easy, but moments like these reminded her of the importance of her work, not just as a restaurateur, but as a leader who stood for respect and equality. With a final glance around the bustling dining room, Keisha stepped onto the floor to join her team, ready to continue making a difference. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe, comment your thoughts, and share with others. See you in the next story.